Good day. My name is Donald Staub. I'm the director of the School of Foreign Languages at Izmir University of Economics in Izmir, Turkey. Today I'm going to be talking about micro-credentials and digital badges, and in particular how they are of relevance and importance to in-service language teachers and administrators. Because I'm at the School of Foreign Languages, it only makes sense that I'm talking about it in relationship to language teachers and administrators, but in fact these can apply across all professions, all fields. So what I'm going to talk about is a problem and offer a few solutions. Of course, there are still a few challenges that are relevant to those solutions. But nonetheless, I'm going to talk about this in terms of its ability to solve these challenges. And then I'm going to provide a couple of examples toward the end of the talk. So let me begin by talking about the first problem, which is related to certificates and credentials. Um, let's just say, for the sake of illustration, that we have a 14-week course, your typical 14-week course in an undergraduate or graduate program. It really doesn't matter. And so you have some students who sign up for that course. Now the students take that course, they enroll in it, they take the course, they do the homework, or maybe they don't do the homework. But by the end of the course, you might have something that looks like this, right? You've got your poor performers, your average performers, and your high performers across the population of students in that course. Now, the question that arises then, particularly in today's context, is who are the average performers, who are the high performers, and what's the difference between the two? Meaning, how is it that we're supposed to differentiate between the average performers and the high performers? What is it that the average performers did? What is it that the high performers did? And what's the line that separates the two groups? I mean, what in terms of not in terms of numbers or averages or scores on exams, but in reality, I mean, what is the difference in terms of the amount of work or the quality of work that they did? How are we supposed to know? How is an employer supposed to know what's the difference between these two populations? So furthermore, if we take a look at your classic transcript that's out there today, what you're going to have is you're going to get probably you're going to get a letter grade. You might get a final score in a course, but you might get a letter grade. You'll probably end up with a letter grade in that course, and that letter grade ends up on your transcript, and then it's converted to some scale, and then it's on a 4-point or a 4.5 scale, and that's all the employer or the graduate school or whomever who's taking a look at the transcript will know about the student and the class. So if the student gets a B in that class, what in reality does that mean? What did that student do to get that B? And were they at the top of the class or in the middle of the class, or where were they in that class, and how did they get that B and why did they get that B? So this is still problematic because it doesn't give us a whole lot of information about the student and that B. So looking at other opportunities for quote-unquote learning, you may attend a conference, you may attend a workshop. I have attended many conferences, I have attended many workshops, and you probably get a certificate that looks like this one at the end, right? Everybody gets one of these certificates. In fact, a lot of people crave these certificates because they put them in some kind of a dossier. What do I want to say? A kind of a portfolio of the work that they have done over the past year or the past 5 years, whatever. And it shows that, as this one clearly shows, that that the person that is awarded the certificate has participated in that event and may or may not have actually made a presentation at that event. They may have, had a paper accepted for presentation at that event, but they may or may not have actually presented at that event even. So it's hard to say based on this once again, two-dimensional certificate what exactly an individual did to earn that certificate of participation. Uh, so here's the crux of the issue, is that most certificates and credentials are, first of all, they're institution driven. They're prescriptive, meaning that an institution decides what goes into the curriculum, that decides the courses that go into a curriculum if we're talking about a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree. So it's the institution who makes that choice. And the institution says, in order for you to graduate and get the degree and get the credential that we're offering, you have to take these courses, and you have to get a certain grade point average as well in order to graduate. The second issue with certificates and credentials then is that they're monolithic, or they're homogeneous. What that means is that by and large, the courses stand alone by themselves. And now, obviously, a program today might have program learning outcomes, and they may have a matrix that shows clearly how each of the classes in that program are working toward fulfilling the program learning outcomes, and how they are integrated and how they are aligned with one another. But even still, most programs, arguably, you can make the case that courses in those programs are standalone, and that they don't necessarily stand up or are strengthened by the other courses offered through that program, the other courses around them. When you're talking about workshops, when you're talking about conferences, again, these are supposed to be learning experiences, such as the one that you're involved in right now. They're what many people would call sit and get, that they're passive. You attend, you may or may not be paying attention, you may or may not be actually interacting with the other participants in the room, whether it's real or face-to-face or virtual. And you may or may not even be listening. You may have this on in the background, but you may be doing other things. And so there's no way to ensure that the participant who ends up with the certificate actually did something to earn that certificate. Another issue is that, as I've mentioned before, is that they're two-dimensional, they're opaque, they're non-descriptive. It's very hard to see why a student got a B. What does that B entail? How did that B come about? What did the student do to actually earn that grade or that degree? The end result is that these don't work for either the employer or the employee. They don't tell either one of them what the individual did to earn that credential, to earn that certificate, and therefore the employer has to rely on some older methods such as an interview, and not get a full picture, quite possibly not get a full picture of the person that they're trying to employ. So it becomes, the whole system becomes rather difficult to tease apart and to find a clear picture of the potential employee. It becomes really difficult there. So this leads us to a possible solution, which are micro-credentials. Let me start by giving you a common definition of micro-credentials. Micro-credentials, according to Microbowl, which is an effort by the European Union to actually integrate micro-credentials into its education systems. This is for micro-credentials in the Bologna process. That's why it's called Microbowl. So a micro-credential is a small volume of learning certified by a credential. So let's tease this apart for a second. First of all, micro-credentials by and large are shorter in duration. They're not 14 weeks, although there are some that might be 14 weeks. Generally, they might be much shorter, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, maybe a total of 15 to 20 hours of seat time plus out-of-class work time dedicated to that particular micro-credential. They're very granular, which is what makes them micro-credentials, and that is that they generally drill into a specific skill, a specific facet of of an area, and it allows the participant or the earner of that micro-credential to look at something very closely, very granularly. They're often competency-based, meaning that in order to earn the credential, the participant must demonstrate some level of competency. So it's not going back to this notion of sit and get, where a student may leave the session and never touch that topic again. In micro-credentials, a well-designed micro-credential asks the participant to absorb the material, reflect on the material, take it home, apply what they have learned, and then report back on that application. Likewise, micro-credentials are often referred to as T-shaped. T-shaped I'll talk about more in a minute, but essentially what it means is that it gives the learner more latitude in terms of what they want to study and how deeply they want to study. They are both employer and learner driven. By employer driven, meaning that going back to that notion that the institution drives the curriculum. The institution could either be the university itself, or it could be a centralized body such as the Council on Higher Education. In this case, they are employer driven, meaning that the employers need someone with a specific set of skills or a specific skill, so they are the ones who say, these are the micro-credentials that we're looking for because we need people who have this particular skill. And they are learner-driven. So what that means is that the learner, based on where they want to work and what they want to do, would be able to pick from a menu their own pathway, if you will, to continually improve. These are postgraduate, meaning after someone has at least received their bachelor's degree, but it's a way to keep learning throughout the rest of their lives. So this is why micro-credentials become so compelling and so relevant, particularly in today's context, because people don't always have time to go back to school for another 4-year degree or even a 2-year degree. And also, these are much more flexible in the sense that they can kind of pop up and be built in a shorter amount of time than a 14-week course or a degree can be. So these are very compelling for people today who are very busy, who are working hard, and they don't they're not interested maybe even in an advanced degree, a graduate degree. They just want to be able to acquire a new skill so they can apply it at their current work situation or perhaps at a prospective work situation. So looking back again at this competency-based idea, what that means is that the participant would design an actual application, would design maybe like a project of some sort or a way to apply what is being learned in the micro-credential and develop that, apply it, and then report back with evidence. So this is what I did, and this is what I learned by going through this process. So that's what it means by competency-based. Now, let's talk about T-shaped for a second. T-shaped, what you can see here are some badges, and I'll talk more about badges in a minute, but what you see are some badges here. And the badges, you'll note, have stars on them. The top row has a star on them. Now, if we look at the red ones, the language analysis set of badges, you can see, if you look closely enough, that there's a 1-star, a 2-star, a 3-star, and a crown. Now, different institutions, different organizations use a different set of signifiers for these different levels. At our institution, in the School of Foreign Languages at Izmir University of Economics, we use the stars and the crown. What that means is that the deeper you drill into a particular badge and the content related to that badge, the more stars you can earn for that badge. And the crown, for us, the crown signifies that you have presented on your learnings at a conference, or you have published your learnings as well from that particular project. So where does T-shape come in? T-shape means that you can, it allows the learner to drill into these to the depth that they want to. You can drill down to a 2-star, you can drill down to a 3-star, you can drill down to the crown. It's up to the individual learner and the issuing organization. So you can go broad across, and you can go down just like a T. So that's the idea behind the T. And of course, what is expected is that the deeper you go, there's a greater amount of reflection that goes on. And we've all heard the famous Dewey quote that learning doesn't come from from experience. It comes from reflection on experience. And so the more reflection you can do on your learning experience, the better off you're going to be, the better you're going to learn that new skill, that new competency. So in a sample rubric here for one of our badges and micro-credentials that we offer at, again, in the School of Foreign Languages, is that in order to get these different stars or the crown, you have to do 3 different things. There has to be the development, there has to be an implementation, and then there has to be a reflection component. So one of our trainers from our teacher development unit will work with the instructor on designing the actual micro-credential. They'll work on it together, and based on how deep that individual instructor wants to go, they can earn up to 3 stars, or they can earn a crown. But reflection is critical across all of those levels. So let's take a quick look at this notion of career pathways. Again, if you have a number of badges offered, you are going to have different people pursuing these badges to different depths. So for example, we have in-service teacher A. So in-service teacher A could go after this first micro-credential and maybe drill down a couple levels, and then go after a second micro-credential, drill down a level, go to a third micro-credential, drill down even further, and so on and so on. So what you have is that in-service teacher A can follow these different micro-credentials and drill into them to the depth that they choose, depending on their own desire, their own needs, in order to improve themselves professionally over time. But you might have a different teacher do something differently. They might choose a different set of badges in a different order, right? A different set of micro-credentials in a different order, and they may drill down to different levels. And so it's up to the individual to make those choices in terms of which micro-credentials they want to pursue and the depth to which they would like to drill into those micro-credentials. So here's the second part of the solution, which are the digital badges. I think it's important to make a distinction between micro-credentials and digital badges. Quite often they are thought of as one and the same thing, but they are really not. The micro-credential is actually the study, the learning, the experience, the application. All of that is the micro-credential that goes on that I just described. Whereas digital badges become a signifier of the learning that took place and the new skill that has been acquired. And of course, it also depends on the level that the participant has drilled into those micro-credentials in order. And so it's signified through the number of stars or quite possibly a crown or whatever signifying system the institution uses. But there are three things that I would like to talk about in relation to digital badges. First of all, there are something called open badges, and if you do any reading about about badges, you might come across this term as an open badge. What's an open badge is that usually the metadata that is behind the badge is easily accessed. So what does that mean? It means that, as I talked about the micro-credentials, you have to develop a project or you have to develop an application. You actually you apply that, whether it's in a classroom or in some other context, and then you get some results from that application, and then you reflect upon that application. So all of these different stages you might end up putting on paper as a report, or you might end up making a short video presentation, whatever it is. That becomes the metadata, so that someone who wants to see what you did to earn that badge and to earn 2 stars or 3 stars or the crown can click on a badge, whether it's in something such as your LinkedIn account, or maybe in something called a repository, or you may hear the term backpack, where the badges are stored online, so that you can click on the badge and then that data, that metadata, the report or the video that you recorded pops up, and the person can see what you actually did to earn that badge. So if you go back to the original challenge or problem that I was discussing about the opacity or the two-dimensional nature of transcripts and credentials, this is the opposite of that. You can actually click on it. You can click, so to speak, on that B on the transcript, and you can find out exactly what that student did to get that credential. In fact, this is the way that the whole world is going to be going in terms of these electronic credentialing. The old paper transcript is going to be a thing of the past, probably within the next 10 years, as we move more toward the digitization of credentialing. So an employer or potential employer will be able to click, so to speak, on a transcript or click on some signifier, such as a badge, and find out exactly what a student did to earn that grade, or to earn that star, or to earn whatever signifier there is. The other point about this is that digital badges are portable, right? You can put them, you may have seen them in the signatures on the bottom of people's emails. Of course, the more badges you get, that gets a little bit crowded on your email. So generally they're put in someplace like a backpack or a repository. Badger is probably one of the leaders in the field in this area. It all started with Mozilla, the people who brought you Moodle. They were the first ones to have this so-called backpack. But in any case, there's generally a repository that might be out there where badges are stored, and you would be able to send your current employer or your potential employer to that page to see your collection of badges and to dig into them and see what you did to earn those badges. The other thing about digital badges or micro-credentials is the legitimacy issue. They bring a certain level of legitimacy because they are demonstrating exactly what you did in order to earn that micro-credential and that badge. So this is the issue about metadata. What someone would be able to do is click on the badge, and they would be able to see a report and a reflection, perhaps a video, perhaps some photos. Maybe it sends them to a blog posting, something so they can actually see the learning outcomes and what was done to achieve those learning outcomes. Of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, there are challenges to this whole process. Number one is awareness and buy-in. Not everybody is aware of micro-credentials, although they are gaining the awareness is gaining, and many people and many organizations are buying into this system, particularly in the private sector. Any major corporation these days is, if they're not offering their own micro-credentials, then they are certainly using them as a way to make choices about employees. You know, some of the Googles and the Amazons, they definitely have micro-credentials, and they are competing. In fact, if you're not aware of this, I mean, Google is starting to compete with universities in terms of offering micro-credentials as opposed to degrees. The idea is that the degree is slowly becoming a thing of the past because people want employment and they want it now. They can't afford to take your classic 4 years or 5 years to get to a degree. They might need to get the skills necessary to get the job that they want much sooner. And so the quickest way through to that is through micro-credentialing. Google realizes that, and they have sets of micro-credentials that you can earn, and many other corporations out there as well. The other part of this, an important part of this, is legitimacy, or a so-called ecosystem. So in order for this whole process to work of micro-credentials, you need a viable ecosystem. And by an ecosystem, there are three key participants in the ecosystem. There's the provider of the micro-credential and the badge. There's the recipient, of course, and then the employers. So somebody has to, or what we could call a recognizer, for lack of a better term, somebody who recognizes that the badges and the micro-credentials offered by a particular provider are valid and legitimate. And so once that ecosystem develops, then you're going to have many more people becoming aware of and interested in this micro-credentialing system. It's only a matter of time before Turkey itself becomes involved in this. Just recently, if you're not aware, YÖKAK, the quality control arm of YÖK, had a webinar on micro-credentials and digital badges. So it's on their radar. It's probably going to be coming in the near future, as long as they have a way to standardize it and to demonstrate the legitimacy of the micro-credentials that are being offered. Another challenge, of course, is that, the flip side to all of this is that badges in particular are looked at as juvenile or looked at as childish. People are collecting badges, like you would Pokemon stickers or something like that. It's just not seen as something that professionals do. But that's looking at it from, in my estimation, it's looking at it from a completely wrong perspective. Another issue with challenge is making them cost-effective and revenue generating in order to sustain it within an institution, within an organization. Somebody has to be able to somebody has to spend time to create the micro-credential. They are the ones who have to grade the micro-credentials, score the micro-credentials for each of the individual participants. That takes time, and that means they need to get paid for that. Well, in order to do that, the return on investment means that there have to be enough participants pursuing a particular micro-credential to make it worth the while of the individual to create it and the provider, the organization, to actually put it on the market so that students or potential students will buy into it. The final challenge is just simply having enough of these badges. When we talk about the career pathways, remember I showed an array of badges. There have to be, for any particular field, there have to be enough micro-credentials to sustain it. The more micro-credentials you have, the more that participants will be able to choose, the richer the menu, the more attractive it will be. So all of these are potential challenges to it. I think that as the ecosystem develops in any context, whether we're talking about Turkey or whether we're talking about the field of education or language teacher education, as that ecosystem develops, these challenges will slowly melt away. I strongly believe that. So let me give you a couple of examples. I've mentioned a couple times that at the School of Foreign Languages at Izmir University of Economics, we have instituted such a system. Our system is more about badging than the actual micro-credentialing. Micro-credentialing means that we're designing short courses. The teachers within the program, the in-service teachers, will attend the course, then they'll turn around and they'll apply what they have learned, and so on. What we are doing in the School of Foreign Languages actually is we're letting the instructors, under the guidance of our teacher development unit, the trainers within our teacher development unit, the instructors design their own pathway in terms of, this is the project I want to pursue, this is how I intend to get some background knowledge on it, then I will apply it in my classroom or classrooms, and then I will reflect on it and then present on it. So every year we have a workshop festival where instructors who have done professional development projects are able to present their activities, their action research, and their reflections on it. And so by going through that cycle, the TDU trainers, the Teacher Development Unit trainers, are able to judge, assess the work that the instructor has done, and they can award the badge at the end. So it's kind of a reverse badging system, in the sense that the instructors themselves get to determine what the badge is going to be in the particular topic area, and of course they get to determine the number of stars that they want to shoot for as well, as they go through that whole process. So if you go to the QR code on your screen, you would be able to learn much more about our badging system within the Teacher Development Unit in the School of Foreign Languages, and you can see some samples of some open badges, because you can click on them and you can see a little bit of the metadata. It's not extremely rich. We just got it off the ground this year. It will be richer as we spend more time developing this system, but it gives you a sense of what it is and what it looks like. The second example I want to talk about is a partnership between TESOL Turkey, the Leadership and Management Interest Special Interest Group under TESOL Turkey. We're called LAMSIG, and it's specifically for leaders and managers in the field of English language teaching. If you're interested, Google us, find us, and join us. We do lots of interesting things. And our third partner in this is the U.S. Embassy Ankara, that has given us funding. The U.S. Embassy Ankara and the Regional English Language Officer, also known as RELO. We've received funding from the embassy to establish a pilot micro-credentialing program for leaders and managers in English language teaching. So our first set of micro-credentials, and therefore badges, are these. We're going to offer 6 of them, hopefully sometime before the end of the summer, and this will run into the fall, and individuals will be able to sign up for one of these micro-credentials and earn a micro-credential in one of these areas. Again, these are specifically for leaders and managers. It doesn't mean that you have to be a leader or manager. It's just that this particular set of micro-credentials are designed for leaders and managers. However, you know, it just goes to demonstrate that there are, if you break the field into all of its subcomponents, there are an endless array of micro-credentials that can be offered by any particular field. But if we stick to English language teaching, English language teaching leadership and management, There are certainly no end to the skills that the individuals need, and those skills may or may not be developed in an undergraduate program or a graduate program. So this is an opportunity for the individuals in this field to learn something and to apply it, and therefore to gain competence in that skill area. That's it for me. I hope this has been of use to you. I hope it has piqued your interest. If you've got questions, if you want to find out more, drop me a line, and I'd be happy to answer your questions. That's it for now. Thank you very much, and have a good day.